Hi, I'm Kushmeister, SWAT Kats fan. When Hanna-Barbera's popular show, SWAT Kats The Radical Squadron, was canceled in 1994, three episodes were left unfinished. This is part one of my oral summary of these episodes, beginning with Succubus, exclamation point included, also known as The Curse of Kataluna. My reason for making these is so inquiring minds can know what would have happened in these three episodes had they actually been finished and aired as part of the show's second season. Now, my sources for this particular episode include a draft provided to me by Mark Lungo, dated May 13th, 1994, itself provided to Lungo via Christian and Yvon Tremblay, the series creators, and the revised draft provided to Matt Fiske by the Tremblays, which is dated May 17th, 1994. I'll cover what differences there are between the two drafts at the end. Both drafts are available to be read online, and links will be provided. So, first things first, the title. Most people, I think, know of this, the first of the three lost episodes, by the name given in Mark Lungo's Animato article about the series, in which writer Lance Falk identifies it as The Curse of Kataluna. It was after, and because of this article, incidentally, that Lungo first began contact with the Tremblays and was sent a copy of the May 13th draft of the script. I don't know why Falk called it The Curse of Kataluna. The name Kataluna is never mentioned in the script, and both the May 13th and May 17th drafts use the title Succubus. Mark Lungo has suggested it's possible Hanna-Barbera intended to change the title at some point once the episode actually went into production due to the sexual connotations of the word succubus, a female demon who drains a man's life force through sex. But until some model sheets or storyboards surface with either the Succubus or Kataluna title, we won't know for certain. How far along in production did Succubus get? Far enough that we know voice actress Nancy Lanari would have played the villain, and it is further claimed in the aforementioned Animato article that all three of the unfinished episodes, Succubus, Turmoil 2, The Revenge, and The Doctors of Doom, were modeled, storyboarded, and voiced, but never animated. Enough preamble, though. On with the show. The story opens at the MoDaD shipyards, where dockworker Gino Furness and his pals are knocking off for the night. Gino turns down his co-worker's offer to go bowling and walks to his car. After a fake-out scare involving a seagull, Gino is attacked by a fierce gargoyle-like monster which carries him away. The next morning, the enforcers are investigating his abandoned car. Angora is on hand to provide exposition in the form of one of her news reports. Gino is the sixth large, physically fit male cat to go missing in MoDaD City in 2 months. 5 other individuals have gone missing and turned up later on, dead, their bodies drained and mummified. Anne attempts to interview Commander Farrell and Felina, but is brushed off because the two have to go and meet with Mayor Manx about something. The Farrells drive to Enforcer headquarters to find Manx and Callie Briggs waiting for them along with Katrina Moorcroft. Katrina is a wealthy heiress worth megabucks who moved to MoDaD City 2 months ago and started paying to have parks and libraries built. Her latest contribution to MoDaD City's culture has been a brand new Philharmonic Hall named after her. Described as mysteriously beautiful, Katrina wears a live ferret as a fashion accessory, giving her a slightly eccentric air. She gets out of her Rolls Royce style limo to immediately begin vamping on Farrell, much to the displeasure of Felina, who dislikes her on sight. The feeling is apparently mutual. Commander Farrell finds himself uncharacteristically smitten with the Moorcroft heiress and doesn't seem to notice the friction between her and his niece. He gives Katrina a tour of Enforcer headquarters, with Manx following them, fawning over the latest big contributor to the city and eager to see to it that she is kept happy. After the tour is concluded, Katrina invites Farrell to the inaugural performance of the orchestra at the Moorcroft Philharmonic Hall. Manx suddenly insists that Callie go too and asks if she'll be bringing a date. She bemoans the fact that she hasn't got her car, much less a date. The reason she doesn't have her car is because it's in the garage being worked on by Chance and Jake. At the garage, Chance is trying his latest idea to improve the performance of Callie's car in a callback to the giant bacteria. Whatever was wrong with the car has been fixed, but he and Jake have also taken it upon themselves to add a turbo feature to the car's exhaust. Apparently, Chance's motto is, "If it ain't broke, keep improving it until it is." Naturally, when he tests it out by flooring the accelerator, it causes one of the tailpipes to come off and shoot across the room, nearly hitting poor Jake. The solution to the problem proves to be that the tailpipes just need to be held on more securely, which Jake accomplishes using a rivet gun. After that, Chance's ill-advised fire-belching exhausts work fine, although it's unclear what they actually do besides make the car look cool. Callie arrives. Deciding that one of the mechanics might make a good +1 for the orchestra, she casually name-drops the Philharmonic Hall to gauge their reactions. Chance dismisses classical music as boring, but Jake says he likes it just fine. Having found her clear choice, Chance invites Jake to attend the performance with her. After she leaves, Chance angrily demands to know what he's supposed to do all by himself at the salvage yard while Jake is out, but Jake simply replies that he can work on the Turbo Cat, which apparently needs some repairs. Elsewhere, Felina and an Enforcer sergeant find the dead body of Gino Furness in the river. He's shriveled up and desiccated like the other 5 victims. Felina wonders when the gruesome nightmare will end. At the Philharmonic Hall later that night, Farrell and Katrina sit in a private box. Mayor Manx is with them, apparently having invited himself along. The 2 lovebirds ignore him. In the audience below, Callie is with Jake, who's wearing a suit. The orchestra performs The Fur Seasons by Pervaldi. Ugh. The music is being broadcast on the radio, and T-Bone is listening to it back in the hangar as he works on the jet, apparently because he likes torturing himself. Angry over Jake getting to go on a date with Callie and hating the music, he somehow uses the radio to tune into an Enforcer band, as he would prefer listening to the Enforcers yak at each other over listening to Pervaldi music. Meanwhile, a construction foreman is doing a late-night inspection of Skycore Towers, an apartment building that's under construction. Its motto is "Luxury living at an affordable price." Suddenly, he gets attacked by the gargoyle creature from the beginning. He runs and attempts to get down from the building in a construction elevator, but a second gargoyle appears and grabs him. Before the creatures can escape, Felina appears in an Enforcer chopper and does the old "hold it right there" routine the Enforcers always seem to think will work on monsters. She calls for backup. In the hangar, T-Bone hears her over the radio. "Looks like I've got a date too," he observes, "with some monsters." Since he's just spent the better part of the evening taking apart the Turbo Cat's engines, he has to take the Thunder Truck, apparently rebuilt since being blown to bits in its debut episode, When Strikes Mutilor. Back at Skycore, Felina battles the gargoyles using her chopper. She shoots a crane arm, causing it to swing around and hit the gargoyle holding the foreman. It drops him, and a pile of sand breaks his fall. The creature's eyes glow a particularly alarming shade of red, and they begin firing energy beams from them. One of them damages Felina's chopper, which crashes into the partially finished building. She leaps out and falls, but ends up hanging onto a girder. The gargoyles blast the girder with their eye beams, causing her to fall, with no sand pile underneath her to break her fall, as we cut to commercial. As Felina plummets to her death, T-Bone arrives and rescues her using a series of bungee cables that form an elastic net to catch her, allowing her to swing down and get into the back of the Thunder Truck. They hear a cry for help and realize that the gargoyles are still trying to kidnap the foreman. He gets into a jeep and drives off. The monsters chase after him, prompting our heroes to follow in an attempt to stop the abduction. T-Bone drives while Felina mans the gun in back. Much banter is had between the two. "Can't you keep this thing steady?" complains Felina. "Cripes," grumbles T-Bone. "She's been in the truck 2 seconds and she's already telling me how to drive." The chase leads into a warehouse district where the gargoyles grab the jeep and lift it into the air. One of them rips open the roof and yanks the foreman out, and then they drop the empty jeep down towards the Thunder Truck. T-Bone has to plow through the side of a warehouse to avoid it, and they lose the gargoyles, allowing them to escape with their prisoner. After some more banter and bickering, Felina uses an onboard radar to locate the creatures, heading northeast. Pursuit resumes, but after arriving in what T-Bone identifies as the high rent district, they lose the creatures, and all they find of the poor foreman is his dropped hard hat in the bushes. Nearby is a large mansion, Moorcroft Manor, the home of, you guessed it, Katrina Moorcroft. Deciding that this is too much of a coincidence, Felina goes and knocks on the door and speaks with the butler, a rather unhelpful individual named Laszlo. He claims he hasn't seen or heard anything unusual. Returning to the Thunder Truck, Felina asks T-Bone to drive her back to Enforcer headquarters. She thanks T-Bone for rescuing her, and he simply shrugs and tells her not to mention it. "It was quite a date," he quips. He gives Felina what is described as a SWAT Kat beeper, which seems similar in function to Callie's communicator, except with a blue button instead of a red one, and tells her to use it if she gets in trouble again. She insists that she doesn't need it, but T-Bone urges her to keep it for good luck, and so she puts it in her pocket. Back at the Philharmonic Hall, the performance is over and everyone is heading home. An interesting opportunity to have Farrell and Jake run into one another is sadly squandered as Callie drives Jake home in her car. He and Farrell never interact that we see. Jake describes the orchestra's performance as, quote, radical, while Callie says the same about the tune-up job on her car, borrowing a little bit of Chance and Jake's lingo. Farrell bids Katrina goodnight, and she gets into her Rolls-Royce-like limo, which is chauffeured by Otto, who is described as resembling actor Erich von Stroheim, most likely in his role as Max from Sunset Boulevard. Katrina seductively tells Farrell she hopes to see him again soon, and then leaves. On the way back, she begins to suddenly age at a rapid rate, pleading with Otto to drive faster and faster as she continues transforming. By the time they finally get to the house, Katrina has completely turned into a withered old hag. Heading inside, she's met by Laszlo, who tells her that all has been prepared. Complaining that these temporary solutions aren't working anymore, she says she has to take the life force of someone who is in love with her during tomorrow night's eclipse. Then she can fully restore her youth and beauty for 100 years. And she's finally found the perfect one. Otto explains to Laszlo that the poor sap who's fallen for their employer is Commander Farrell, and they grin evilly as Katrina goes up a spiral staircase and into an elaborate observatory where the Skycore Towers foreman is shackled to a stone pillar. She approaches him, and we cut to the outside of the mansion as we hear him screaming. Callie drops Jake off back at the garage. Jake tells her goodnight and thanks again as she speeds off and then turns to find Chance lounging in the doorway. In an apparent callback to Bride of the Pastmaster, Chance mimics him, thanks again, and asks if he had a good time. Jealous? Asks Jake, practically strutting. Chance replies that he had a quote-unquote date of his own and fills Jake in on the events at Skycore Towers. Jake is upset. I can't believe you let Felina Farrell ride shotgun in our Thunder Truck, he fumes. Chance just grins and soaks in his friend's indignation. Jealous? He asks. Can't you feel the love and friendship between these two? Cut to the next day. Felina goes to see her uncle about what happened and her notion that Katrina Moorcroft might be involved. Farrell has aged slightly and has a streak of gray in his hair, but Felina either doesn't notice or simply doesn't draw attention to it. Farrell is angry when he learns Felina was at Katrina Moorcroft's house questioning her butler. He says Felina is just upset because Katrina is interested in him, and although this may seem like an odd thing for him to say to his niece, this can be explained by the fact it isn't uncommon for the child, even a grown one, in a single-parent family to be hostile toward their parent's boyfriend or girlfriend, viewing them as an intruder. Since Farrell and Felina have an almost father-daughter relationship sometimes, despite being uncle and niece, it's conceivable that Farrell is misinterpreting Felina's objections to Katrina as being along similar lines. Felina chooses not to dignify this with a reply and simply points out that Katrina Moorcroft came to Mega Cat City 2 months ago, apparently from nowhere, and that the disappearances and murders, referred to as, quote, these crimes, also began 2 months ago. Farrell refuses to believe that Katrina has anything to do with the abductions and killings. He dismisses it as just a coincidence and dreamily explains that he thinks Katrina is fascinating and exciting. Ooh, down boy. And that he's never met anyone like her, blah blah blah. He does everything but have heart-shaped eyes in this scene. So you're not even going to check her out? Asks his niece, disbelieving. I certainly am, Farrell replies, snarking. I'm meeting her for lunch. Ba-dum-tsh. Well, there you have it, people. Commander Farrell is going to check out Katrina Moorcroft. Like that. Felina just rolls her eyes and leaves. We then cut to Callie, who is on the phone with Dr. Abby Sinian, which, along with the Tremblay's art book, finally settles the ABI or ABBY spelling debate about her first name. It's ABBY, by the way. Sinian has developed a theory about who or what could be behind the murders. Having failed to get a hold of Farrell, he took a long lunch, she says. She has instead contacted Callie and invites both her and Felina to the museum. At the museum, Dr. Sinian shows them a prehistoric carving of a ferocious female demon, presumably similar in appearance to the male gargoyles that have been abducting people. Sinian identifies the creature in the carving as a succubus, and says that succubi drain the life forces of their male victims in their quest for eternal life, leaving behind only parched, lifeless husks. For unknown reasons, this is not being discussed in the privacy of Sinian's office, but in the main area of the museum with several other visitors present, including some old ladies. Listening in, they're horrified and run away, revealing one visitor who isn't surprised in the least by anything he overhears, Otto, who has his employer's pet ferret with him. Nobody notices him. How'd he get a pet through museum security? Claim it as a seeing eye ferret? Callie, of all people, seems slightly skeptical, calling it, quote, a pretty wild story. But Felina is convinced. Having listened to everything that Dr. Sinian just told her, she now believes that it really is a succubus that is behind the recent deaths, and that Katrina Moorcroft is involved somehow. Resolved to locate the succubus, she says a creature as ugly as the one depicted in the carving shouldn't be difficult to find, but Sinian warns her that succubi can transform themselves into beautiful women. This gets Felina's mental gears turning, and her thoughts turn again to Katrina Moorcroft. Nearby, the eavesdropping Otto becomes increasingly concerned the more he overhears. Sinian further explains that there is a centennial eclipse of the moon coming up, and succubi are supposed to use the eclipse for a ritual to renew their beauty for 100 years. Suddenly, a, quote, monstrous head, not really described in any appreciable detail, pokes itself through a nearby doorway and roars at them. Felina tries shooting at it to no effect as suddenly a second head crashes through the wall and tries to eat them. As they flee down a hallway, a third head erupting through the wall, Felina tries to radio for backup, only for a huge spiked tail to come smashing in through the wall and knock her down. She drops both her gun and the radio, and the tail smashes them. Felina, Callie, and Dr. Sinian try to escape out the front entrance, but one of the heads blocks their path. Otto has made himself scarce in the meantime, by the way. They flee through the museum with the heads, 3 in total, smashing through walls trying to attack them everywhere they go. Dr. Sinian leads them to a stairwell, explaining that they can get out through the garage. Just like in The Past Master Always Rings Twice. And just like in that episode, they'll be forced to go to the roof instead. Except here, at least, we get an explanation for why they suddenly changed their destination plans. Specifically because they're halfway down the stairs when a head appears and blocks their path, forcing them to go up instead of down. Meaning, assuming they were on the ground floor to begin with, the parking garage is underground, I guess? Whatever. It's a little difficult to follow the action here. I imagine it would have played out better in the final episode, but essentially, they're being attacked by what initially appear to be 3 different monsters, but which are eventually revealed to be one large spike-tailed monster with 3 heads, which is referred to in the script as the Tri-Head. Real original there, Glenn. Callie finds the communicator in her purse and activates it as she, Felina, and Dr. Sinian run out onto the roof. However, this turns out to be a bad idea because they become trapped up there when the Tri-Head erupts out of the stairwell, like the saber-toothed tiger in The Past Master Always Rings Twice. Descriptions are still vague, but as noted, it has 3 heads and a long spiked tail. I imagine the heads are on the ends of long necks, rather like a hydra, for it to be able to attack from multiple directions at the same time. The snarling beast approaches the three trapped she-cats as we again cut to commercial. As the Tri-Head approaches the trapped Felina, Callie, and Dr. Sinian, backing them towards the edge of the roof, the SWAT Kats arrive in the newly repaired Turbo Cat. Razor fires what's referred to as a mega octopus missile at the three-headed monster. This is one of the earlier missiles designed for the series, and promotional art and model sheets were made depicting it being used to capture one of the long-necked flying reptiles from The Past Master Always Rings Twice. But to my knowledge, this would have been the first time one had actually been used in the series. However, since I imagine it's just like a regular octopus missile in all but size, it may have been used before and I just never noticed. The Mega Octopus missile grabs the Tri-Head and knocks it off of the roof. Specifically, it's said to crash through a wall, even though the museum roof has no walls around it. However, as it falls, it makes a point of using its tail to knock the three she-cats off the other side of the roof, and they fall screaming towards the pavement. Before the three can get turned into street pizza, however, Razor uses the second new missile of the episode, an airbag missile. Aimed at the ground, underneath the falling she-cats, it blows up on impact, revealing an expanding air cushion which catches the three and breaks their fall. Now that they've seen to that, T-Bone flies around to the other side of the building, where the Tri-Head fell off, so that they can deal with the beastie, but it's gone. There's a big crater where it landed, but they only find the discarded Mega Octopus missile. While they're making sure that Callie, Felina, and Dr. Sinian are alright, they don't notice Katrina's limo speeding off. Inside, Katrina is fresh from her lunch date with Farrell, and of course looking young and beautiful again from having sucked the life out of her seventh victim last night. She has her pet ferret in her lap and chides it for having failed her, revealing it was the Tri-Head all along. Up front, Otto warns her that Felina knows too much, but Katrina dismisses it for now, since by the eclipse it won't matter anymore what Felina can or can't prove. At Enforcer headquarters later, Felina hands her uncle a report about the incident at the museum and tries to tell him about Dr. Sinian's theories and the conclusions that she's drawn about Katrina. Farrell, visibly having aged enough now that his niece can't ignore it, has added a new item to his ordinarily Spartan desktop, a framed glamour photo of Katrina. Farrell chides her for coming to him with such nonsense. Indicating the photo, which he can't stop fawning over like a little love-sick boy, he asks her, "Is that the face of a succubus?" Evidently, he wasn't paying attention to the "she disguises herself as a hot babe" part. Felina becomes angry. She tries to insist that the monster attack meant that Katrina was having them spied on and tried to have them silenced, but Farrell, also becoming angry, suggests that she take some time off. Ouch. Felina gives up her uncle as hopeless at this point and resolves to go and pester Katrina, but makes the mistake of announcing it out loud, causing Farrell to jump up and forbid it. The Farrells argue. Felina points out that he's aged at least 10 years since meeting Katrina, while her uncle brushes off her concerns, insisting he's never felt more alive. And then Farrell drops a bombshell. When Felina, agonizing, asks if he won't even bring her in for questioning, Farrell reveals that he intends to do precisely that, at dinner that night. And the question I intend to ask, he says, is a more important one. So saying, he takes out a diamond engagement ring. Yep, Farrell's going to pop the question, folks. Katrina has invited him out to Moorcroft Manor for a romantic dinner, and he intends to ask Ms. Katrina Moorcroft to be Mrs. Katrina Farrell. Felina simply says that she's heard love is blind, but that she just hopes that for her uncle's sake it isn't fatal. But Farrell isn't paying attention anymore, having gone back to fawning over the photo. Cut to that night. Farrell and Katrina eat a lavish fish dinner in the dining room of Moorcroft Manor. Farrell is wearing a tux and Katrina has an elegant gown. Outside, Felina is spying on them through a window using binoculars. Evidently she's been there a while because nothing sinister has happened and she's beginning to grow impatient and upset with herself. Wondering whether she's wrong about Katrina, her mind turns to wondering, with annoyance, what she's going to wear to the wedding, when suddenly she notices Laszlo and Otto driving away from the mansion with their headlights off. Suspicious, she follows them in her Enforcer cruiser with her own lights off. She tails them to Megacat Marsh, as opposed to Megacat Swamp, and hides in some bushes and watches them. Laszlo and Otto go open the trunk and take out a shrouded form with a familiar-looking booted foot sticking out. It's the dead Skycore Towers construction foreman, and they're going to dump him in the swamp. Realizing she was right about Katrina after all, Felina leaps out and holds Laszlo and Otto at gunpoint and demands their immediate surrender. They're startled but recover and grin evilly. Otto reveals Katrina suspected Felina would be watching the house and had them go out to dispose of the foreman's body to see if she could be drawn out. Ah, it's a trap. Laszlo and Otto transform into monstrous gargoyles and attack her. Well, that explains why the gargoyles and Katrina's servants were never seen together. They were one and the same. But according to this anyway, Felina knows martial arts, kung fu and karate specifically. With a hearty hi-ya, she kicks the transformed Laszlo into the water. Yep, Felina just drop-kicked a gargoyle. But it's 2-on-1, and so she's quickly overcome, and the transformed Otto kicks her in the face, knocking her out. Are wedding bells and wedded bliss in Farrell and Katrina's future? Well, back at Moorcroft Manor, Farrell pops the question. Katrina doesn't seem surprised and says that she's flattered. Farrell asks if that means she accepts, but before she can answer, Laszlo, back to normal and presumably having changed into a new set of clothes, comes in and says the eclipse has begun. Katrina tells her anxious boyfriend to hold off on the answer for now, heading for the upstairs observatory where she does all her life draining, insisting that he accompany her. Come, she says. Come, she says. We should go to the observatory and watch the eclipse. I promise you it will be a sight you'll never see again. She does everything but go, "Mwah-ha-ha-ha-ha-ha." Farrell doesn't complain. He laughs and goes with her, but tells her he does hope for an answer soon. In the observatory, Katrina has him sit in a chair facing the window, which allows moonlight in, and stands behind him with her hands on his shoulders as the eclipse begins. Otto, also back to normal, Laszlo, and a third servant come in to watch with them. Katrina begins to age rapidly once again, but because he's seated with his back to her, Farrell doesn't notice. He begins to press her for an answer to his marriage proposal. When she won't answer, he notices her aged hands are trembling and asks if she's okay, prompting her hands to fly up and grab the sides of his head. Her fingers grow into claws, and she begins to suck his life force out. The engagement ring drops dramatically from his hand and rolls away. Guess the wedding's off. She begins becoming younger, and on top of that, it's never explicitly spelled out, but considering that she's described as, quote, enjoying the ecstatic surge of energy and uttering forth, quote, gasping moans, It's plenty obvious that her reactions here are intended to be somewhat sexual. Add one more thing to the list of stuff making this one of the more mature episodes. The younger Katrina gets, the older Farrell gets, withering into an old man. Otto flicks a switch, causing a secret passage to open, revealing Felina, who has been tied to a chair. Katrina begins gloating evilly about how she's going to suck her uncle dry and be young again, blah blah blah, and Scooby Dooby Doo. Felina cries out, "No!" and struggles against her bonds, causing the chair to tip over. The SWAT Kat beeper T-Bone gave her earlier slides out of her pocket. Didn't these bozos frisk her? You guys fail at being evil henchmen. And she uses her shoulder to hit the button, summoning your heroes and mine, the SWAT Kats. T-Bone and Razor do their usual big entrance, crashing through the viewing window on their Delta backpacks, which are their hang glider, parachute, jetpack combo things. It's fight time, baby! Because Katrina is focused on draining Farrell, as she herself keeps announcing out loud, she only has until the eclipse is over to do this. She sicks her fanboy squad, I mean her evil henchmen, on them. Laszlo, Otto, and the third guy, who never gets a name, turn into their gargoyle forms and fight the vigilantes. The SWAT Kats fight them hand to hand. T-Bone defeats Laszlo and the other guy by dropping a chandelier on their heads. A chandelier in an observatory? Fancy. He then cuts Felina free. Razor knocks Otto out of the room through the window that they broke in through. But gargoyles can fly, so he recovers and flies back up, only for Razor to tie up his wings by launching 3 bolo missiles, causing him to fall out. Again. Katrina's pet ferret transforms into the 3-headed monster, and T-Bone, Razor, and Felina fight it. It uses its spiked tail to pin them against the wall, with the 3 of them each between one of the spikes. The SWAT Kats launch their Glovatrixes off their forearms and into 2 of the creature's 3 mouths, causing it to fly backwards. Its tail follows after it naturally, the spikes coming loose, freeing our heroic trio. The tri-head crashes through a wall off-screen, causing a goodly portion of the observatory roof to come down on top of it, either knocking it out or killing it. Either way, it's out of this fight. An enraged Katrina, forced to abandon draining Farrell, attacks them herself. Emerging dramatically from the smoke created by the tri-head hitting the wall, she transforms, quote, like Maleficent, into a huge winged female demon, hereafter referred to as simply the Succubus, although I'm going to continue calling her Katrina. Reaching into the rubble to grab the elderly Farrell, who is still alive but unconscious, Katrina leaps up and crashes through the skylight and flies away with him, taunting him, "Another few moments and it will all be over, dearest." Otto recovers and returns. He sure is tenacious. Felina yells for the SWAT Kats to save her uncle while she handles him. The SWAT Kats fly after the Succubus and her victim on the Delta backpacks, while Felina shoots a canister of tear gas into Otto's mouth, knocking him through the stone pillar, bringing another portion of the roof caving in on him. Outside, the SWAT Kats fly to where they left the Turbo Cat. They hop in and take off after Katrina and her victim. By the time they catch up to them, poor Farrell is almost gone, his skin like parchment. He is nearly at death's door. Snarling at the approaching jet, Katrina shoots lasers out of her eyes, taking out a portion of the Turbo Cat's wing. T-Bone fights to hold the aircraft steady, maintain pursuit, and avoid the demon's attacks all at the same time as Razor targets her through his scope. He's concerned that he might hit Farrell by firing on Katrina, but T-Bone tells him to risk it since Farrell is going to die otherwise. Resolved now, Razor targets the hand Katrina is gripping Farrell with and launches turbo boomerangs. They hit her hand, causing her to lose her grip on Farrell. Now, on the plus side, severing physical contact prevents her from continuing to drain him. On the negative side, now he's falling towards the ground from a long way up. Crying out, "He must be completely drained before the eclipse ends," Katrina tries to dive down after him, but T-Bone flies the Turbo Cat past her face, preventing her from nabbing Farrell again, and the unconscious commander continues falling. Annoyed and a little panicked because the eclipse is beginning to end, Katrina now attacks our heroes directly instead of simply trying to evade them, grabbing onto the Turbo Cat. Reddish, evil energy shoots through her clawed fingertips, gripping the aircraft, and flows through the jet's inner workings, frying the instruments and shorting out the power like a supernatural EMP. The Turbo Cat begins to plummet. Releasing them and allowing them to continue falling, Katrina resumes diving down after Farrell, who, somewhat improbably, is still falling. How high up are they? The eclipse finally begins to end. In the jet, Razor's efforts to get emergency backup power are proving useless, and it seems as if he and T-Bone are doomed. But just as Katrina is about to catch up to Farrell, still falling, the moon comes out from behind the eclipse, the SWAT Kats' interference having delayed the demon long enough that her time is up. Bathed in, quote, pure white light from the moon, she screams, "No!" and disintegrates into dust. Back at the mansion, so do the three gargoyle minions. The Turbo Cat's power comes back on. Whether this is because Razor finally got emergency power working or because Katrina died is unclear. T-Bone zooms down after Farrell, who is still falling, and Razor saves the unconscious commander from finally hitting the ground by firing an airbag missile. The giant airbag expands upon impact, catching him. Cut a little abruptly for my tastes to the Megacat Memorial Hospital. Felina, T-Bone, and Razor look on worriedly as a doctor treats the alive but still drained Farrell. He isn't too hopeful, though, fearing that Farrell may be too far gone. Weakly, Farrell opens his eyes and asks what happened. Even in his withered, near-death state, he's still the grumpy enforcer commander we know and love, and so demands to know what those two are doing in his hospital room. Felina holds his hand, whereupon he miraculously begins to de-age and become young again. Sap that I am, I choose to interpret this as her touch curing him with her love. The relieved Felina squeezes his hand lovingly, and T-Bone and Razor admit that they're glad he's okay and swear they won't hurt his pride and tell anyone they saved him, as the story ends. The end. So, what are the differences between the two drafts of the script? The May 13th draft and the May 17th draft. In the copy that Mark Lungo sent me, the May 13th draft, T-Bone has a line at the beginning of Act 3 that is not present in the final version. He says, "Good thing we got the Turbo Cat fixed in time." In the same copy, when talking to her uncle in his office, Felina only identifies Katrina as Miss Moorcroft in the following line. "No, it's getting to you. I'm going to have a little chat with Miss Moorcroft." But in the May 17th draft, provided by the Tremblays, she says, "No, it's getting to you. I'm going to have a little chat with Miss Katrina Moorcroft," identifying her by her first and last name. Razor's dialogue in the May 13th draft about how to handle Razor's dialogue in the original draft about how to handle the tri-hit is different. T-Bone, jettison Glovatrixes. In the revised May 17th version, he says, T-Bone, set Glovatrixes to blow. This is a very odd change, to say the least. Other than that, though, the two drafts appear to be more or less the same.